This video is intended to illustrate how you can work with strings in Scratch. Scratch doesn't natively come with a lot of character string manipulation capabilities, but very often when you're writing projects and code, you may want to get at different characters within a string or do things with them, manipulate them in some way. So I thought I would put a few examples here, not because you don't necessarily need to know how to find out how many vowels are in a string or something like that, but it gives you an example of how you can go through all the characters in a string and maybe do something with them. So I have 6 little functions here. Again, you could either copy them directly if you needed them, or you could start with some of them and maybe do something else. So it's mainly meant to be more of a starting point, but for example, again, how many vowels? So if you were to type in a string of some kind, which Scratch is going to ask you for, if I hit enter here, if I hit enter, it tells me there are 4, so let's make sure that's correct. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that looks good. Now if I have the same string and I want to see how many consonants, and I hit enter here, it says 10. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so that looks good. How many digits? Well, if I type in the exact same thing, I expect to get 0 because there's no digits in there. But if I have something else, another string that maybe has some zeros in it, some digits, we'll see, hopefully we get the right number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these are basically counting things within a string. So maybe you want to find some other things, but this is just an example of that. Sometimes you want everything in uppercase, which Scratch doesn't seem to be very case sensitive, but you may want to have some sort of output that always looks a certain way. So if I type in all lowercase, it should give me all uppercase, and it should, I guess I should test cases before I try it. If you have a mix, it should also work, and it does. So Scratch doesn't really care, the input string, it doesn't really care what it is, but we're forcing the output string to be all uppercase. Now this substring, set substring, it actually may be something you might want to do. This is can be really useful depending on your project. So what this is going to do is it's going to say, now type in your string, and then it's going to ask you for a number, which is called the start index. So the index is what letter you are in the phrase. Now it starts with 1. That's how Scratch works. So 1, let's say I want the word brown to be extracted from here. So I would say, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the B is the 9th character. And then it's going to say, well, how long a substring do you want? And I'm going to ask for 5 characters, and it should give me what I want. So I'm going to say start at index 9, and then give me 5 characters. And so it did that, just that. So it started here, and then it counted out 5, and it returned that. So that could be useful. You never know when you need to extract certain things from a string. And then shift right is just a little, not much. If you type in a string, it's going to ask for a number of characters, and it's going to put actually blanks in front the way I've written it. But of course, you can imagine maybe you put a pad character of some kind in front or something else, that could be modified to do that. It's basically moving over the characters. So that's all I have, and obviously there are loads more of things that you can do with character strings, but I just thought I would just give a few, and you could build on them if you need to. Let's just peek inside. Now if you look in Scratch, I'm looking at the operator section. Over here, it appears, as near as I can tell, that's all we've really got for character strings. So we've used join before. It'll take 2 strings and put them together. I'm going to skip down to length. We've seen length when we've used lists, so it's a similar idea. You can think of a character string as kind of a list of characters, and it says length of some string, so how many characters are in a string. Now the letter, what this will do, so letter 1 of world would return a W. If you put a 2 in here, letter 2 of world would return the O, and letter 3 the R. So you basically give it the index or the letter number that you want, the character number, and it will return that. And that's, I think, all that we have. So basically all this code does is each of these buttons are just broadcasting something to Scratchy so that Scratchy can ask the question and get basically the input that we need. So Scratchy is basically setting the input string. And so then, and it's going to broadcast the thing that's actually going to do the work. What I did was I actually made two different ways, two different blank sprites here. One way you can do this is to just explicitly have the receive, and it just does the work right there. I also have put a few of them using blocks, because depending on what you're doing, if you're going to be using these things over and over, a block may be more useful. So for some of them, I did that. So we'll look at both of these situations. I'm going to try not to go in too much detail here, because I think these require a lot of thinking to really kind of get what's going on, especially for new coders. But let's just take a look here. So if I hit the how many vowels, eventually I'm going to get to this when I receive count vowels block. And so what I'm doing here is I wrote this as a not equal. You could have written it the other way and said if it is equal, and then do the opposite. But basically, if my input string isn't a 0 length, so I actually have things in my input string, I initialize my output string to blanks. Now I have two of these little things here, these variables. Now the counter is actually the thing that counts how many vowels. So if you have a phrase like how now, where there are 2 vowels, that's the thing that's going to hold 2 when all is said and done. I is keeping track of where I am in the actual character string, which character I'm pointing to. So I'm going to start with 1, because Scratch starts with 1 as your character strings. So I'm going to do a repeat loop, and I'm going to repeat based on the number of characters in the string. So length of input string, so in this case how now, that's actually 7 characters because there's a space in there. It would do it 7 times. And so there's another variable j. It's a little hard to tell, that's a j. So I is 1, j is 1. J is going to actually go through the input string. So in this case, how now? It's going to start with 1, because that's I, so I'm looking at the H. So letter 1 of the input string equals letter J, or letter 1, of A, E, I, O, U. This string, these are all the vowels. So I didn't use Y. I just went with the strictly A, E, I, O, U vowels. So if that first string is an A, then I'm going to change J by 1. I'm sorry, I'm going to end my repeat loop, sorry. If it is a J, you end the repeat loop. But if it's not, and J is still bigger than, or less than 5 rather, I'm going to go back in here. And what happens, J is now increased to 2. So even though I'm still looking at letter 1, so first I compared it to an A. If it wasn't an A, the next time through I'm going to compare it to an E. If it's not an E, right, change J by 1, J is now 3. So I'm basically looping until I hit an A, E, I, O, U. Or, that's what this check is. J is bigger than 5. I've checked all 5 vowels. It's not one of them. So either I'm going to end the repeat loop because I found a vowel, or because I've exhausted all the vowels and there aren't any in there. So when the loop comes out, it's going to check if J is less than 6. So I have to kind of go one more because I want to make sure that I've checked all 5. It could have been that I found the 5. So this condition will be true if we didn't check all the vowels. That is, it found a vowel. So, like, let's say it found an E. J would be like 2. So 2 is less than 6. Okay, it was an E. You're going to change the counter by incrementing it by 1. Now, if it's not this, then we're not going to set the counter to anything, and the counter remains 0. That's when we go through for that first one. Now we're going to change I by 1. That was just the first letter we looked at. So in this case, we just checked H. H was not a vowel, so that didn't happen. Now I'm checking the second one, which in this example here is an O. So this loop is going to keep going until I get to O. Now in this case, I am going to set my counter because I found one. So now it's 1. Change the letter by 1. I'm looking at the W, which is this W. So it says, check H. Is it A, E, I, O, U? Nope. Check O. Is it A, E, I, O, U? Oh, it is, yes. Change your counter by 1. Check W. Is that A, E, I, O, U? And the same with the space and the N and the O, which it will count up, and so forth. So this is a way, it's a loop within a loop to kind of, check through all the characters. Okay, so this may take a little bit of thinking about. You may have to go and kind of look at the code and really think it through and maybe trace through it. But if you get that, you're going to understand the count consonants and the count digits because it basically does the same thing. So instead of just checking A, E, I, O, U, and check consonants, I'm going to see if it's one of these consonants, right? And if it isn't, that means J will be bigger than the number of consonants there are, which is 21. And then so it's doing the same sort of thing. And then also, also with the digits. So in this case, with digits, you're comparing it to the 10 digits that we have. And if J is bigger than 10, you bump out. So that's kind of what these three things are doing on themselves. May not be a thing you need, but if you want to go have code that has to check through all the strings, all the characters in a string, this might be a helpful structure for you. The shift right, I think I also put in here. Basically all I did, and there must be a better way to do this, but is I basically make sure that my length of the input string, so they typed something that is bigger than 0, and they also gave me a shift number that was bigger than 0. So I create this sort of blank string. So I'm going to repeat shift number times. So if they said 5, I'm going to do this 5 times. I create a blank string by joining in a bunch of blanks. So first 1 blank, 2 blanks, 3 blanks, 4 blanks, 5 blanks. So I don't want to hard code this. I want it to just do it the number they say. And then I just join the output string with the blank string that I created. So in this case, if it was 5 blanks, and then the output string, which I initialized to be whatever the input was. So there's probably a better way to do that, but that's what I thought about. Now over here where I had blocks, I put, let's see, the convert to uppercase. So if you have an input string, I made a new string that was blank. I'm setting I to 1 because I want to go through all the letters in my input string. So I'm going to repeat this for every letter, so kind of like that previous thing. And then again, J to 1. So I'm having this other variable that's going to check to see what letter I have. So I'm going to look at the first letter. Let's say it was an H, right? So it's going to loop through this until I see this H. Then this becomes true, and I'm done repeating. Sorry, what this means is that there was maybe an exclamation mark or something that wasn't a letter in there. If it's not one of the 26 letters, I just do a straight copy of what was ever in the input string. So if they put some weird special characters, it just copies that there. Maybe it's a dash or a hyphen, something like that. If it wasn't bigger than 26, then I'm just appending. I'm taking letter J, so I knew it was, say it was an H. So whatever this index is, it's going to be the same index here, but I'm changing it to the uppercase version. And then I change my string counter index to by 1. So now I'm going to be looking at the O. And then I check through here. Where's the O? I find that number for O. And then I'm going to put that uppercase O in that same spot. It's again another one you probably need to think about a little bit because I'm not explaining it all that well, I don't think. And then this is the substring. So basically, you start with the original string, you have a start index, 1 would be the first letter, and then you have the substring length. So first I have to make sure I'm not dealing with a blank string here. I actually have a string with some characters in it. And then I'm just doing a check here. What basically this check is doing is checking validity. So if you have this string here, and you say I want the 1, 2, 3, like the 5th character, 5 characters, right? So I can't go past 5 characters. So it's trying to correct what the length should be. So instead of making it 5, it's only going to make it 3. So that's what's kind of going on in here. It's just doing some checking so that it doesn't blow up. And so by the time I get here, the hope is that if I did this right, and I can't guarantee I exhaustively tested this, but if I did this right, the start index is bigger than 0, and the length that they're asking for is valid. It's not going to go past the string. So I set my I to start index. So if it said 5, right, start at 5. And repeat the substring length. So if it was 3, the start index with 5 and then 3 characters, you're going to do this 3 times. You're going to set the output string to join, okay, whatever is in the output string, and the output string is starting as blank, with letter I. And I is starting with start index. So if you said 5, it's going to take letter 5 of the original string. Then it's going to change that 5 that you started with, change it by 1, so now I'm looking at 6. So it'll take the 6th and then the 7th, right? So it's just looping through to get however many characters you wanted. And once again, you want to really think about what this code is doing. It's a little bit hard for a beginning coder. So anyway, this is some very basic character string manipulation things. There's a whole lot more you can do. The intention here again is just to give you a basis if you want to kind of start somewhere. Maybe this could be helpful. I hope so. Thank you for watching and listening, and enjoy your scratch coding.